make people aware that Spaceless is just a generalized multiplayer platform for any kind of game, be that a 4-player, small kind of first-person shooter, all the way up to a 50,000 player persistent MMO style world. So really the whole point of technology is incredibly scalable, from like being very small to being very big, and that's really what we've been trying to message a lot more with GDC. So traditionally when people think of us, they're like huge MMO worlds, that's what we do. We totally do that, but we also create people for much smaller games, so in any way in between.
I missed that last part.
And also really good for smaller game worlds.
Smaller game worlds? Is that because there's been less market interest in the huge single-shard MMOs?
Yeah, so in the eastern regions, massive interest there, but in the western regions, yeah, it tends to be more traditional kind of session-based type of gameplay.
Oh, interesting.
So what we're doing is kind of thinking about the session-based games of today and people how they can increment them with spatial OS. So like, for instance, taking say the battle royale genre and adding say another 100 NPCs to that to mix PvP and PvE style content, or taking the survival genre and making some kind of ecological simulation that actually has interesting AI and things like that. So taking games of today that people are already building and then taking them to one step past.
Gotcha.
And then hopefully over the years what we hope is the industry will follow to the large scale worlds. There are some people in the West who do also want to put large scale worlds.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like what we've realised is there's a lot of people that don't want to do it yet. There's a massive content risk there, there's massive kind of concerns of doing that. So kind of taking people off what they're doing today and going into up.
Interesting. Right now I think as far as single shard massive MMOs, it's Seed and Worlds Adrift, right? Is there any others?
So Seed is probably the most, it's the one single shard one. Worlds Adrift still has regionality. So Seed is going to be, I don't know how many players, they're looking at 10,000, maybe 50,000 players in a single shard.
Right.
And it's going to be a completely global instance, so one instance for everyone in the world. The reason they can do that is because the gameplay they're going for is kind of very latency tolerant.
Right.
So players can kind of have these slower paced interactions with the game mode. It's not very like twitchy and action oriented. Worlds Adrift, they have very big large game modes with like 1,000 players or so, but they still have to have regionality because of the latency requirements of the game. Like fundamentally, we can't fix the speed of light, so we can't make when you need a low latency game, we can't improve that. So you need to have your game near your players for lower latency games. So if you're looking at single shard super worlds, you're really looking at more kind of social experiences or slower paced games that would be effective in that kind of scenario. Or maybe, so I think if you think of a game like a space game like Eve or something like that can also work as well, because the way you do the interactions, you can like do a lot of kind of server-side interpolation there. So those could work well as well.
Did you say Eve Online? Or I missed that? Yeah.
So those are the kind of games which would work well for a single shot across the whole world, because their latency requirements are much faster paced games.
Right.
So the way we do that is we basically allow developers to combine multiple game engines together on the server side. So traditionally, when you make a multiplayer game, you have one game engine on the server side, clients connect into that. That's fine, but that has computation limits in terms of what you can do. So we allow you to stitch together multiples of those game engines across a single game mode, and that gives you that kind of access to significant players.
What engine do you play best with?
So I think this is an interesting question. It depends on what you're looking at. So today we have integrations for Unity and Unreal.
Right.
Our Unity integration is much more mature in terms of we've been from actually day one we're integrating with Unity. So I'd say that probably is the most fully featured in terms of if you're looking for a massive, large persistent world. But our Unreal offering, we've really started to focus down on that now, because ultimately it has that kind of Western vibe of like those action-based games that we're focusing on now.
Right.
So that we're kind of just released our new product called the Unreal GDK late last year.
With Unreal, you said?
With Unreal.
Okay.
And so that is essentially a native integration with Unreal. It works with all the same networking system and blueprint system that you get with traditional Unreal. So for developers, it's a very, very familiar workflow.
Yeah.
So that today, we're running that with one or two servers, and what we are planning to make there is the ability to combine multiple servers to have much bigger game modes with Unreal. You can also then integrate your own engine as well. So we have SDKs in C++, C#, and Java. You can use those to integrate your own third-party game engines. So for instance, one of our partners, Automaton, who are making a game called Mavericks, they integrated CryEngine using the C++ SDK. They're both building a 1,000-player battle royale style game, and so they're using multiple instances of CryEngine on the server side to kind of compute that logic.
1,000-player battle royale.
Yeah.
How do you even do that logistically?
Yeah, so they've got an interesting mechanic whereby players, the game doesn't just start with 1,000 players.
Right.
Players kind of drop in and out.
Oh, I gotcha.
They're also going to have a mechanic where they have persistent social hubs. So players gather gear from within these sessions and bring them back to the persistent social hubs. They can kind of congregate there, show off the gear and things like that. So I think those persistent social hubs, they don't have a player count for that yet, but that's probably going to be significantly more because, again, the latency tolerance there is significantly better, so you can have many more people because you're not shooting in the social hubs, you're shooting in the main game.
Gotcha. Oh, okay, so they do want to have a virtual world aspect where...
Yeah, so they have kind of like this persistent element to it, whereby players go into those battle royale style scenarios and they go back to the persistent social hub, and that's when they kind of interact and kind of like see each other, but they're not fighting there. So the latency requirements become much better there, and so that's why they can move back. They don't have player count number for the social hubs yet, that's the way.
Interesting that you integrate with Unreal. Sort of suggests, are we going to see future iterations of Fortnite using Improbable?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think Fortnite is already quite a large game and quite a mature game. I think them kind of deciding to take a risk with the plunge of moving Fortnite onto Spatial OS would be quite a big deal for them. But that would be absolutely incredible. Like, can you imagine a Fortnite where now all of a sudden you can have richer NPCs in that world, so you have kind of a level of dynamism in the game you don't normally see today. I think there's a lot of interesting game modes they could add as well, in terms of adding new content. So that's one of the things we've also been trying to get people to realise. When you adopt Spatial, you can now add new game modes that traditionally you couldn't have added very easily before because the server tech in the back scales. I think that would be really cool. I don't know if they'll maybe take the plunge there.
Yeah, but hey, if Epic is hearing this video, watching it, it's because then I imagine you could add player housing and different aspects that are permanent within kind of a battle royale instance.
So that is a big one that we've seen a lot of devs talk about. It's about kind of having those persistent social experiences, and then the kind of day-to-day session experiences is a very interesting one. The other interesting one that we've seen a lot, so another thing that Spatial OS supports is cross-platform play. So we just released our mobile alpha. I think it was last week or the week before.
Oh, mobile alpha? Cool.
Alpha's out now. So that's allowing now to have a mobile device connected with a PC and a console device all into the same game. So this is really good for games like Fortnite. They already do this today where you have a first-person shooter on the phone and a first-person shooter on the PC or the console. But the thing that we're talking to devs about that they're very interested in is what we call mixed play. So this is on your mobile device, you have, say, a top-down 2D RTS style view, which is kind of a low-fidelity interaction, which makes more sense for a mobile device. And then the guy comes home, sits down on his couch, picks up a controller, and plays a fully first-person Twitch action-based FPS. So you kind of get this mixed experience whereby the player is playing at their home in this fully first-person experience, but then on the bus or work in this kind of low-fidelity, mobile-friendly experience. Then you get kind of 24/7 engagement across your game, which again is a great way probably to monetize.
Are there any games being developed like that?
Not yet. This is more kind of early conversations because, as I said, the mobile product is in pre-alpha. We just now have the point where we can actually get this into customers' hands. So these are very early stage conversations. And then the other space in mobile that a lot of people are talking to us about is social gaming. So obviously social games, casual games are very big on mobile. Having those kind of large social congregational spaces in the mobile sphere is probably going to be a big ticket item for us.
Interesting. A lot. So you're thinking you'll see a lot of social game worlds.
That's one of the things. So I think there's going to be two. I think one is going to be action style games. So our technology is good for kind of battle royale style, larger than battle royale, more interesting new kind of action games. So I think there's going to be a slew of those, and then the other slew is probably going to be social style games as well, because social games are all about kind of getting a lot of people to congregate and interact with each other. And our technology is really good place to do that.
Speaking of which, because I started my blog with Second Life, and that is kind of one of the original single shard worlds, and the question has always been, can we improve it and make it perform, because there's still a user base. So is that something that could be migrated to Spatial OS possibly?
So run me through the technology stack you're using.
Right now it's just a massive grid of servers linked up together, and each server represents part of the world. And so when you are going between regions, you're literally going from server to server.
So are you talking about porting that to Spatial OS?
Yeah, I mean, how would that work if it could work?
So what, do you use any game engine on the server side, or is that all kind of a custom C++?
Yeah, there was, I forget the specific game engine, but it's one of the standard ones.
So it's...
OpenGL, actually.
It's OpenGL, so it sounds very custom. So again, it depends. So our Unreal offering is very, very good for ports. It has been kind of designed from the ground up to allow an Unreal developer who's already built a game to port into Spatial OS. Our Unity offering is a little bit more tricky, but it is viable. So you will have to replace some of the kind of networking logic you put in there. a kind of third-party engine, so like CryEngine, and this sounds like a third-party engine style.
Right.
That is going to be very tricky at that point.
Very tricky.
There's kind of a lot of inbuilt kind of assumptions you probably made that wouldn't necessarily be sympathetic towards spatialized. So for kind of pre-built games on third-party engines that are not Unity or Unreal, we generally don't recommend ports. They are possible. They're not completely impossible, but it requires a lot of kind of technical due diligence and kind of process to get that done.
Thinking of single shard massive worlds, right now, how large a concurrency could you manage, do you think?
So this is a really interesting question. So I don't actually have, I don't know if I have the slide. So we recently created a new version of our runtime, called Runtime version 2. This has significantly better performance characteristics than the old version. I think I can get you the numbers after this if you want. We basically ran like total performance benchmarks of the total number of CC you could have at different fidelity rates, so ranging from like an action style 30 Hz game all the way to a lower fidelity like 0.5 Hz social game. And what that could look like in terms of density pockets or total capacity. So Rob in his talks talked about this, but we can give you details on what.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'm not sure you've seen Dual Universe. They just did a test demo with 30,000, mostly NPC agents, but the logic is that you could conceivably have 30,000 within a kind of local concurrency.
Yeah. It's for us though. Again, the key thing, the numbers, like we call them how much can you bench, like how big can you go. They're great and all, but ultimately, I think very few games want to take over that kind of those limits now. So that's why we've really been trying to push the message around we're good for all kinds of games.
All kinds of games. I've been wondering about that. Do you think the single shard massive concurrency, is that just kind of a niche that's sort of EVE Online, and it's sort of that? Because EVE Online has a passionate niche, but it never really took off, and is that just kind of a challenge you guys are facing?
I mean, games like PlanetSide also exist, right, which are more action-based and very large battles. I think ultimately, though, it depends on the pacing of the game that really dictates kind of what makes sense in terms of scale. Because at some point, if you've got 10,000 guys running around kind of shooting each other in a high-fidelity action game, it's very busy, it's very hard to know what's going on. And I don't know if that necessarily makes it a more fun experience for people. I do think the social elements to those games, having a lot of people in those spaces, that would make more sense. But I don't know for action games it would make sense. Now for EVE, space battles, they're kind of a bit slower paced, so they kind of would make some more sense because you can see what's going on, observe what's going on in the game world, and that may make a bit more sense in that field.
Interesting. Well, and thinking about those, how can you handle player data in a way that understands behaviors? Is there a way of tracking that, like how much people own, what parts of the world they're living, so on?
Yeah, so we, in terms of that today, so every object inside a spatialized game world is fully persistent.
Fully persistent.
So what we mean by this is every time you update any property of any game object, it's stored in our in-memory database. That is then snapshotted. So you can change the frequency of snapshots, but that gives you basically all the data of the world put into a file. You can then turn into, say, JSON on analytics or whatever you kind of want to do. So in terms of like working out what player owns what, the way a developer would do that today is they would probably take those snapshots, move them into a JSON format, put that into a third-party analytics solution, and then start analyzing the data through that. We do, in sort of a vision piece, kind of have ideas on how we could help developers do this more effectively, but today, in terms of product offering, we don't offer anything.
Well, because I know Herman has talked a lot about that, of you can model a whole massive simulation of the world, and you can discover things that can be modeled to the real world based on simulation running in OS, spatial OS. So how far are we there with seeing something like that?
So that's not our focus today. Our focus has primarily been on game models, and that's because our technology is designed for making games. It is not designed for running large-scale simulations. There are things with large-scale simulations in terms of the determinism of your simulation and things like that we don't currently solve today. One day, maybe, we will invest in that space. It is kind of a space that we've talked about publicly. But ultimately, we are very focused on gaming today, and that has a kind of different characteristics than what a simulation person would do. One thing we are looking at more, though, is kind of real-world training. And because our simulations are like for games, so things like police training and stuff like that, that is one space that people are looking at, especially with the mixing of VR and spatial OS in the kind of online training space.
Oh, interesting. I was going to ask how well it mixes with VR.
Yeah, so it supports PC, so it supports VR. We're also designed for very high fidelity interactions, so if you want a game that runs at 120 Hz, spatial OS is good for that, so it's very good for VR time experiences.
Are you seeing many developments of social VR?
Yeah, so because In terms of we have an open platform, like a community style element to our product, and then we have what we call partner games. So these are like our more we like giving production support and very highly thing to them. In the kind of open platform space, there are a lot of VR players looking at kind of doing social type experiences. I think that is going to be a very interesting industry. For now, we're not choosing to double down on it, but if something kind of catches a light, then I think we would definitely take it.
Okay, really interesting. Any other features we should talk about before we wrap up?
So yeah, in terms of the large world stuff, not particularly. I think the big thing for us that's coming up in the kind of next 6-month time frame is trying to be a more comprehensive solution for just general multiplayer games.
Right.
So adding a suite of online services that kind of things like matchmaking, player profiles, player identity services, all built completely open source. They're completely free to use, and you can easily switch them up from another third-party providers if you want. So this is because we're trying to become a more inclusive solution for us.
I see. So we'll see some open source components that you'll release that people can kind of build on.
Yeah. Exactly.
Create the next Fortnite, for example.
That's like Epic are also open sourcing a lot of those services as well, and we will play very nicely with those services because you can essentially switch them out from.
Okay, well, very interesting. Thanks very much for taking the time.
No problem. Cheers. Thank you.
Make the video. Stop.